So I don't even know where to begin. I just got off doing an interview with Dana Dunford, and she is a property manager guru. She started Hemlane, and it's a national, global property management company. So if you know somebody who's looking for the property management anywhere and everywhere in the world, but you want to kind of strategically choose to have them to handle some things, but you still want to be involved, this is the perfect place. I'm actually going to be diving into it, checking it out more. So take a listen. She's a very innovative individual. She definitely went from $0 in her account, eating ramen noodles, to being where she's at today. So take a listen and never give up. Hello, fellow mompreneurs. Welcome to the Real Moms Podcast, the go-to space for resilient entrepreneurs who are striving for abundant living. I'm your host, Shay, a mompreneur and a realtor here in Columbus, Nebraska. Are you a mom juggling the hustle of entrepreneurship, family life, and personal growth? Well, you're in the right place. On this podcast, we dive deep into the real, unfiltered stories of incredible women who are navigating the journey of mompreneurship. We'll celebrate the victories, share practical insights, and acknowledge that it's okay to face challenges along the way. Success isn't about the destination. It's about the journey and the growth we experience as we balance our careers and the chaos of family life. Whether you're a seasoned mompreneur or just starting on this exciting path, join me and our amazing guests as we explore what it truly means to be a resilient entrepreneur striving for abundant living. Get ready for real, raw, and remarkable conversations that will inspire and uplift you. Because here at the Real Moms Podcast, we believe in the power of community, authenticity, and the strength that comes from embracing the journey together. So grab your coffee, find a cozy spot, and let's dive into the world of mompreneurship. This is the Real Moms Podcast, where we celebrate the hustle, honor the struggle, and thrive as resilient entrepreneurs living abundantly. Welcome to another episode of Real Moms Podcast. I like to start every podcast off with a motivational quote, and today's quote is, "The hardest thing to know is whether to stop or to keep going." Dana Dunford is the CEO of Hemlane, a venture-backed property management platform with over 28,000 rentals and $1 billion in payments processed. She is a strong advocate of purchasing properties anywhere, as the best investments are not typically in your backyard. She supports real estate investors in setting up the most intelligent process to manage rentals from a distance while connecting them with local licensed professionals. In 2018, Dana was named one of the top 20 women leaders and influencers in commercial real estate tech. Dana previously worked at Apple on their worldwide financial planning and analysis team, and at Nest, the home technology company acquired by Google for $3.2 billion in business development. She received her MBA from Harvard Business School. In her free time, Dana is an avid equestrian and skier. She is the first woman to win a calf dressing championship belt buckle of the CA Rodeo. She takes risk in her personal life, but spends her work life advocating technology and prudent spending for a risk mitigated solution for real estate management. Holy moly, that is amazing. My sister actually absolutely loves horseback riding and equestrians as well. But Dana, thank you so much for being here and taking time out of your very busy day to be on our podcast.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Dana, tell me a little bit about your journey, kind of where you started, how you got to where you're at. Because I'm sure when you were younger, you're not like, oh, this is what I want to do. We kind of evolve. So tell me a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there who always have said, I want to start my own business. And I was actually a complete opposite. I never thought about starting a business. It wasn't one of my goals or aspirations. And I was actually really happy in my jobs and what I was doing. It was back in, and I wouldn't have started something if I hadn't seen a huge need and a huge opportunity. And I think at the time I didn't realize how large it was. And as I was building it, I also didn't realize how large it could be. It was more of just keeping my head down, listening to customers, and continuing to build. And so when I was at Apple, my older sister had gotten into real estate investing with her husband. And this was back in 2008. So I'm probably dating myself a lot, in 2009, but it was a great time to invest in real estate. I still believe it's a great time to invest in real estate. For us here in the Bay Area in San Francisco, a lot of that investing happens out of state. because it's an appreciation game here. And of course, you're seeking cash flow if you want something where you mitigate that risk
Mhm.
in investing in properties.
Right.
And so, what I realized through the process, and then ended up getting my own real estate investments through that, was it's actually easy to say, hey, I want to buy a property, but the actual process of finding the property and then managing it is a complete nightmare. And there's no kind of systematic way to do it and just make it where you click buttons and it works.
Right.
And so, for me personally, what I found was, hey, after I purchase the property, I have two options to manage it. One is hire a traditional property manager, or the second is to do it myself.
Mhm.
And if you're out of state, you only have that second option. But there's a lot of people, like 72% of real estate investors self-manage their properties. There's a huge need to say, how do I manage it myself remotely, but use licensed agents for leasing, for any kind of, boots on the ground that you need, but still have the control, have the transparency. And I think real estate is a great wealth builder. And so I kind of saw this need of, hey, there has to be an alternative type of management where you have property managers, leasing agents, owners work together on a platform. You keep the owner in control, you put more money into their pocket. And so I had this kind of vision. The question is, how do you get to that vision? And that I think was the harder part because now that the puzzle pieces are together, it makes sense. But when I was trying to put the puzzle pieces together, I realized it's much more challenging than you think.
Hmm. Well, that reminds me, one of my very favorite quotes is you can't connect wow. You cannot connect the pieces moving forward. You can only connect them looking backwards. And so, like you were saying, like you don't, you know where you kind of want to go, but you're not sure how to get there. And then once you finally do get there, you can look back and be like, oh, I did this and I did this and that brought this together. That didn't work. So it's interesting to like that you said that, yeah, you can't connect those pieces moving forward. You can only connect them looking backwards.
Exactly. And building Hemlane and building our company to where we are today, it was really interesting because there were a lot of times where I said, this is impossible, this won't work. And certain parts of it. And if one part doesn't work, the whole thing doesn't work. Like if you can't manage your rental property from anywhere, from your vacation in Hawaii or you living in Singapore, wherever you may be, the model's totally broken. Then you just go back to the traditional model. And so I think there were a lot of questions when we were building it of, hey, are we failing because we just haven't thought through this problem and how to solve it better? Or is this just not going to work? And I think as an entrepreneur and an innovator, that's where the complexity comes in. That's also where a lot of the anxiety comes in because you're doing it, you're looking to make sure your customers are really happy. And you also never want to oversell and underdeliver. And so you're wanting to go through that entire process and hopefully make it seamless for everyone.
Yeah, and so that kind of goes back to the quote that you had said before is the hardest thing is to know whether to stop or to keep going because it is a constant battle. And one of like Albert Einstein, his one of his famous quotes is the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But then on the flip
Yeah.
side, you hear things like people don't fail, they quit. So then it's like, okay, well, at what point in time do you know if this is actually what you're meant to do and what is supposed to happen, or if you're just spinning your wheels, because I mean, sometimes it could be months and years and whatever else. But I think the vision is the right thing. It's just how are you getting there? You know, are you implementing things incorrectly? But it's hard. Like you don't know.
Exactly. And then the other thing I'd say with it is there's some business models that are just terrible business models. Like the margins are really low. You're always going to find a struggle with it. And so always the question for me was like, hey, in the early days, is that what's happening here at Hemlane? And then this is a terrible model? Or, hey, if we tweak and optimize it, things are moving in the right direction. And I think the other thing that was really challenging at the beginning was the timeline because I had told my husband I'd gotten two job offers to go one back to Apple. And this was back in 2015. So you can imagine where the stock was. I think it's gone up 40x since like I sold my stock. So I had one option to go back to Apple. The other option was to go to Nest and Google, right? And I turned down both offers to start Hemlane, and I assured my fiance at that time, I was like, in 6 months, I'll be paying myself I know I have $0 in my bank account right now because I just got out of business school, but I'll pay myself in 6 months. And then it was like a year and a half later, and he's like, so this person I married who I thought was going to have a steady income, when are you going to actually start paying yourself? And that was interesting because the timeline was so much longer than I had expected to actually get it off the ground. And like in hindsight, it was a great idea to not take that money to make sure we had the right model, not burn through any capital we had from angel investors and stuff like that. So it was a great decision. But at the time, it was really hard because you always have this kind of um carrot dangling over you of like, just go back, it's easier the other path. And I guarantee the other path is easier, is just not as rewarding.
Wow. So especially when you have like your significant other or your support system kind of questioning, okay, well, hey, you said this, we're not there yet. And it's easy to look back and say, yes, that's the best decision I made in my entire life. But at the same time, you would never be where you're at today if you wouldn't, triumph through those hard times and all of that dangling carrot.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so I think that's the hard part of it is like you also need to get your significant other to buy into it and
Mhm.
then be a decision maker, because most of the time when I see that companies fail or someone gives up, it's because their significant other is also not supportive of what they're doing. And I think the benefit I had was my husband's family, they were all entrepreneurs.
Mhm.
And so he sort of got it. He's like, yeah, I remember my parents when they were 28 and they were working investment banking hours for literally nothing. He's like, you're doing the same thing. And so I think he was a little bit more like he accepted it a bit more than I think a lot others. I've had other friends where their significant other, like their wife is like, I'm going to leave you, this is not working. And so I think that's a hard thing because the timeline, whatever your timeline is, it's kind of like construction and development when they're like, hey, whatever the cost is the developer told you, like double it. I think it's the same thing with the timeline to build a business. It's like whatever your timeline is, triple it.
Mhm.
And if you set that up and then like change your lifestyle and your living, which you definitely have to do, you definitely have to cut back. It can be really, really rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting because my husband and I just kind of had this conversation. I have my real estate license. I've had it for about 6.5 years. He
Yeah.
got his 4 years ago, but he does land sales, and land is a lot harder than residential. I mean, it is
Oh, yeah.
if the timeline to get established in the residential world is 3 to 5 years, the land world is 9 to 15. Like it is just completely night and day difference. But it has been a struggle. And I was just texting him yesterday and I just said, hey, just want to let you know, like, I got your back no matter what. Like you keep pushing
Yeah.
forward, keep going. Like we're fine. And I give him so much credit because I admire him so much more knowing the struggles he's been through because I don't think I would have been able to sustain what he's doing, just doing the same thing, kind of trying to get
Mhm.
leads and cold call and drop offs and all of those things with little to no results. You're spending thousands and thousands of dollars for marketing and advertising and nothing in return. So it is sickening. But I know it'll pay off. I know it'll pay off, but you just have to have that vision. You have to believe, but you also have to have that support system who's sitting behind you and cheering you on when nothing, I shouldn't say nothing, but very little is happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, because it's a lonely road. I mean, when you're in the office and especially when you're at a big company, like I was at Apple, my boss had been at Apple for 28 years. His boss had been there for 14 years. I mean, they didn't even have to work. They could have retired at that time, but they just did it because they loved it. But I had so many mentors to look up to. And then when you go into entrepreneurship, you actually have to seek those people out. Like you yourself have to make the effort. And it's hard to do that because you're balancing that with running the operations of your business,
Mhm.
as well as saying, how do I seek mentorship and guidance? And a lot of that is cold calls. Like, hey, you're a company that kind of is in a parallel industry. You're 5 years ahead of me, or maybe like 2 years ahead. Sometimes you don't want someone too far ahead of you. How did you do it? What are the lessons learned? Books, like podcasts, everything. Like you need to be constantly learning and have that mentorship. And there's expensive ways to do that.
Mhm.
And then there's also like, I think what's great about podcasts and books and like Audible books even is there's a more affordable ways to get that type of advice and mentorship.
Yeah, and I love that you say that because I've the last 4 years I've really been traveling and I'm part of masterminds and it's expensive. It is very
Yeah.
expensive, but it does help you get further than trying to do it all on your own. But books and podcasts and audiobooks are so very important. And one thing that I had heard once before is a lot of people look at a book and it's like $28 and they're thinking that that's expensive. But if you could buy a $28 book and say, okay, well, how can I get $1 million value out of this? So like you have to go into
Yeah.
the book and the podcast with intention. But when you do get to the point where you have a little bit of extra income, I definitely encourage people to pay a mentor because when you do pay, you get the value a lot better than, trying to do it on your own. So, and it's real life feedback too, which helps a lot.
Yeah. And what I would do also is I A/B test mentors because what you will find is they each have different insights and feedback. And sometimes you hit one where you're like, they are spot on about everything. They just saved me $1 million
Mhm.
or made me $1 million. And I've actually had a couple of those situations where I could have gone in the wrong direction. And I was like, I'm so glad I just spoke to this person to solve this problem for me. And you almost need a lot of mentors. You need like a finance mentor, you need a mentor just on like business structure. I have mentor on hiring. Like there's just a lot of different insights from that perspective. Yeah.
You said AB. What do you mean by that?
Oh yeah. So I try to A/B test everything. So you know how you had mentioned like you get stuck
Oh,
on
alpha,
things to know.
beta.
Yeah, alpha beta
Oh, okay,
test. So
okay.
like I try to A/B test everything I do. Like even in business, when it's like an example actually you have is with your husband's land development.
Mhm.
So in that particular case, doing the outreach, I'll say, okay, what are the numbers? What's the funnel? How many letters did I send out? What were the results? How many responses did I get? And then how many meetings did I get booked and how much business did I get closed? And I'll be like, okay, I'm not quite sure if it's the messaging or the list that
Mhm.
is the problem.
Right.
And so at first I won't change both. I'll just change one. Like let me just change the messaging. Did the
Mhm.
new messaging work? Okay, both are terrible. Let me change the list. Let me try to outreach to other people. Oh, look, that's working. Okay, now I can A/B test messaging and see which one works. And so I found like as an entrepreneur, if you constantly tweak things and continue to think about your life and your strategy as an A/B test, then you know, hey, is this just not working? Am I out of A/B tests? Or is this working and things are getting better and easier as I go on?
That's a really good way to look at it because in my mind, and I'm not much of a data person. I never really have been. I'm more of like a bigger vision, and then I have somebody
Yeah.
else help me get there. But in my mind, I'm constantly thinking, okay, well, I know I spent this. This is what I got in return when they called me, and I'm always asking people because obviously when I'm helping people buy and sell, hey, why did you reach out to me? Who referred you over to me? And I started tracking my numbers, like where leads are coming from, about 2 years ago. And it's really fun to kind of look back and say, okay, well, this is the percentage that came from this
Mhm.
lead source. This is the percentage that came from referrals. This is the percentage that came from repeat clients. And it really, so then you start realizing, okay, well, that's really where I need to focus my money. If
Yeah.
75% of my transactions come from repeat and referrals, then I'm going to stick 75 to 90% of my money back into my past clients, not paying for new leads. So it's really being aware of where your leads are coming from, though, as well.
Yeah. A really good quote I heard from a advisor of mine, Marco Zappacosta, who started the company Thumbtack. He had said, when you find gold, keep digging. And what he meant by that is in his experience in building Thumbtack and also my experience with Hemlane, there's like one channel that works really well.
Mhm.
And when you find that channel, like double down on it and then constantly be A/B testing. Can I find another one before this channel dries up and maybe
Yeah.
it won't grow as quickly? But when you find that to your point, you want to double down on it. So if it's referrals, continue to double down on those referrals, continue to network. If it's your direct mail and it's working really well, great, continue to optimize that. But I think it's interesting because you read these books about like the 11 ways to reach a customer, and there's a lot of them and you want to test them out. But when you find one that's working, you really need to have that focus. Otherwise, you're spreading yourself too thin and you're like, great, I'm not getting any business out of this, but I'm working investment banking hours. And so I think that's a really good point of like, know where your customers are coming from and then double down on that.
Yeah, it's kind of like a contractor being a jack of all trades, but a master of none. You know, you can't
Yeah.
do everything and expect to be the professional because you can't do it all. Like, I would rather work with somebody who's specific in this realm and specific in this realm rather than hiring somebody who can do a little bit of everything, but is not the professional in that one area that I'm hiring them for.
Exactly. Exactly.
So now tell me a little bit about Hemlane. I mean, obviously you talked a little bit about how it got started. Like, do you have like a employees? How did you grow your book of business? And I know you kind of lightly brushed over it. Took about a year and a half, but I don't think what people realize is that was a very I would imagine that was a very mental struggle for you guys at that time. And that's, you brushed over it lightly. But I'm sure if you were to go back, because I always say like the first year that we got into real estate investing was the hardest. I would never want to relive it, but I don't regret it because it's the best decision that we ever made.
Yeah.
You know, and then I made another change a couple years ago. Would I want to go through that mental breakdown, that change again? Absolutely not. But I don't regret it, and it's the best thing that happened to me. And I know that's just how life goes. You know, because
Yeah.
I'm always wanting to grow. So I know there's going to be something else that happens that sets me back that I'm probably going to question, but I know I'll persevere through it and get to the other side. So I know that was kind of a lot, but do you have employees? How did you grow your
Yeah.
book of business? How did you do all of that?
Yeah, great question. To begin with, the biggest thing for us was a differentiated product, right? So they talk about red oceans and blue oceans. And what that essentially is when you think of a red ocean, it's where all the sharks are. It's blood, right? And so there are 5,000 landlord softwares out there, the turbo tenants, the rent readies, the tenant clouds of the world. But the biggest one that will take them all over is Zillow, because Zillow offers it all for free. And so for us, it was like, great, we'll still build that. We still have to build that as the bare bones in the back end. We can give it away for free as well. Like we can do the advertising to Zillow and 15 other websites with click of a button for free for you. But we want something in a blue ocean that hasn't been done. And we found that hybrid alternative model where it's, hey, you yourself can manage your properties remotely, and we've got a marketplace of boots on the ground for you. Everything from the vendors that you need to a rental assistant and a repair coordinator. And you don't have to be as involved in the day to day. Whether you have one rental property or 100, we can help you out with that. So the first step for us was like, hey, we want to go into a blue ocean. And the reason for that is a blue ocean is very hard initially to deal with, but then you don't have competition and every single sales call is not asking, well, your price is $2 more. It's like, no, we do something they don't do. And this is, what you need and want. And so first it was getting a blue ocean and staying scrappy. So I had written a paper for business school for design and innovation. And that paper was essentially, they said, tell us about any design or innovation that you have. And mine was on property management. I just had a bad property management experience. And I said, the pricing needs to change, the structure needs to change. All these people are overworked and underpaid. You have 137,000 property managers in the US with an average of 3 employees, and they're all working around the clock, and none of them are happy about it. And so I said, you need to reinvent this. It's not like, it's kind of like Uber. You can't like just layer on technology to the existing industry, into taxis. You have to reinvent it and have people shared cars. And so I had the same concept for property management. If you have to completely reinvent this. And when I graduated, the professor said, you graduate on Sunday. Can you come into my office after graduation? I was like, my parents are in town, but like, sure, absolutely. You're not going to say no to like one of your professors.
Mhm.
And I walked into his office and he handed me a $30,000 check and he said, go build it. And that was the impetus of like starting Hemlane. And so I had $30,000, zero in my bank account, and $30,000 does not get you far in San Francisco.
No.
So my husband and I lived with like five other people, and then we moved into like 400 square feet once we got married. But it was one of those struggles where I had to really pull back my lifestyle because my co-founder and I were living off that $30,000. We also got a lot of no's from venture capitalists. So we went out to other angels and we were kind of putting together money. The people who believe in you most are those who know you. And so, like, even one of our roommates was like, she works 7 days of the week and, she's working 12 hours a day. She's on to something. And so he said, "Hey, can I write you a $25,000 check?" So I got a $25,000 check from my roommate. So it was like one of those things where you just kind of build it, but you also say, "Hey, I have to be really scrappy. I have to live off top ramen. I can't have the same experiences and vacations that I used to." And I'm really glad we did that because I did learn in the early days actually going out looking for funding, you're going to get just no's. And then you start questioning it. Is it because I'm a woman? Is it, something with my business? Why don't they love it? Like there's a lot of heartbreak that goes into that.
Mhm.
And so when I suddenly realized, hey, I'm going to have to do this on my own and get our first 1,000 customers on my own, and suddenly my mentality changed because I was totally focused 100% on operations and how do my co-founder and I do it all.
Mhm.
And then it was interesting because the money started coming. So
Mhm.
then I was out to dinner in New York and met an investor and I said, I'm not fundraising. And he said, how many rentals do you have under management? And I said, at that point, I think it was 580 that we were remotely managing, which is larger than most property management shops.
Yeah.
And he was like, "Okay, great. And how much do you have in funding?" And I was like $60,000 that, for 2 years, my co-founder and I have lived off of. And he said, "Great. I only write checks over 1 million. I'd like to give you a term sheet and I'd like to like start moving forward." And that was kind of the impetus of really building Hemlane. But again, it came from that passion of just being the operator and
Mhm.
proving out with the numbers, like, hey, we're going to get there. We're on to something.
Yeah.
And then from there, I realized if you keep focusing on the numbers and keep focusing on your business, the money will come because every investor out there is looking for you versus another company and
Mhm.
who has the best numbers because they're all finance guys.
Yeah.
And so all you have to do is show that you're growing, customers love you, you have retention, and then suddenly the money comes. And so if you change that mindset, it really gets you far. And so that's been really helpful, at least for us, because I think I got from VCs in the early days, I think I got 90 no's of venture capitalists here that I would pitch. And they were like, nope, nope. And of course, you go home and you cry and you say, like, what did I do wrong? Like, I'm literally around the clock. This is the next big thing. And
Yeah.
then once you change that mindset of like, hey, they need me. I'm one of the best founders out there. And you change that and you just focus on your business, it's interesting how it turns things around.
It really is. And then you become a lot more confident and you're not going to take those no's personally. But that's really honestly a beautiful story. And I had a lot going through my head when you were talking about all of that, but it really is amazing because you could easily get upset, discouraged, which I'm sure you did.
Oh, I was so discouraged. I was
Oh,
in
why
such a
did that
bad
happen?
place.
Yeah. And you can smile about it now, but
Yeah, and not back then.
no, I'm sure not. But it really is amazing that you have people who do believe in you. But it is nice to get to a point in your life. It's like, okay, well, if they say no, okay, well, I don't need you. I can find somebody else. You actually need me more than I need you. And it's just a matter of how to look at things, like you said. And one of the quotes that I was thinking of is nobody's coming to save you. So when you
Yeah.
have that mentality, like, oh, I am it. It's me or nobody, and
Yeah.
nobody's coming to save me. Nobody's coming to do it for me. I have to be the one to do it for myself if this is truly what I want.
Yeah, I love that quote. And it reminds me, I told people of dating, the the less you need or want someone, the more they want you.
Mhm.
And so that mind shift, I think it was interesting because I hadn't really realized that because I'd seen all these people I went to business school with were like, I just raised $20 million off of my idea with zero revenue. And I'm like, why isn't that happening for me? And then to your point, I had to flip it. And a lot of those companies are out of business, by the way. So I'm like glad I didn't do that.
Right.
And I just had to flip it and say, you know what? I'm going to focus on our product, our customers, and the capital will come. Like the money will come. And it was interesting because my outreach to just meet with people and get ideas, it suddenly was like, I was talking to a founder who, was farther along than me and had started $1 billion company and was like, hey, can I invest in this? This is cool. Because I'd be like, so how'd you do it? Why'd you do it? What about this? I'm dealing with this struggle. And they'd be like, oh, this is really cool. Can I give you an angel check? And so it was interesting because that really changed things and set us off on a much better trajectory than those first, I would say, 2 years of really self-doubt, questioning, should I just give up? Of course, like my family, my sisters weren't entrepreneurs and they were working at big jobs with huge salaries, being like, well, why don't you just go back to that? What the heck are you doing? Because I'd always say, no, I can't go out on this vacation with you or do this because I just literally did not have the money to do it. It wasn't even a question. And, they didn't really get it. Now they get it, where now they're like, oh, well, tell us a bit more about the journey. But at the time, it was really hard. And I think surrounding yourself with other entrepreneurs actually makes it easier because they get it a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's kind of what I was telling you with this whole Real Moms thing. Like I created my own community because, you see these other communities and masterminds around the world, and you're like, I want to be part of that, but it does cost money, not only to be part of it,
Yeah.
but to travel, to see everybody. It all adds up, which I still encourage people to do those things. But I was like, okay, well, I need to bring a community here. I had this negative mindset that there's nobody else like me. Nobody else is gonna feels alone the way I do. Nobody else is gonna understand what I'm going through. And then you start creating that sense of community, and you're like, holy moly, like there's a lot of mompreneurs out there in my local community that has the same mindset.
Yeah.
And because you do feel very alone. You do, especially when you have kids, because you're obviously focusing on your kids and like your significant other, but then like the money and building a business, people just don't understand it. Like they're like, well, I also think that when you're self-employed, I think they also think that you have like endless amounts of time to go do whatever you
Yeah.
want.
Yeah, it is so true. It's when you have your own business, and like if you work from home, people are like, "Oh, great, I can just stop by for tea." It's like, I don't have time for tea. No, we are not having tea together. I really need to
Mhm.
focus on work every second I get. And so, yeah, I couldn't agree more on that.
Yeah, I know. I've had people say, "Hey, you want to hang out?" I'm like, "Oh, that sounds awful." Like, is
Yeah,
it
totally.
business related? Like, are we going to talk business, or you just want to hang out? Because I don't really do that.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting is your passion becomes work because, like, I think all women are self-learners,
Mhm.
where you want to learn, you want to continue to keep your mind motivated. And so if it's small talk, if it's talking about like gossip stuff, you're like, that's not of interest to me. I want to know, how did you get from point A to point B? How did you solve this problem? How did you build this? How did you make this easier for you? How
Mhm.
did you make your life less stressful? How did you automate this part of your business? How did you close more deals? Like all of those questions are the ones and you want to surround yourself by other entrepreneurs who've done that.
And I would say like a big t tip of advice is just ask. Like I think people are so afraid of rejection and fear of failure that they don't even ask. Like, you are putting
Yeah.
yourself in positions with people who are worth probably millions of dollars and you had very little to no money. But I'm sure there was times where you were afraid to kind of get in that room, but you have to put yourself in those uncomfortable positions and you have to be able to ask those questions. Otherwise, you're never going to get to where you want to go.
Yeah. And you still like on the side of like business development, mentorship, I reach out to a ton of people who say like no. And I used to be like, well, why? Why don't they like me? And now the question I do is like an inner reflection of like, could I have improved that email? What about the subject line? Maybe I should A/B test that subject line. And
Mhm.
then I start kind of tweaking my own things, or I just ask why.
Yeah.
And then when I ask why, if someone says like, no, I'm not interested, and I say, but why? And then they're like, oh, now's not a good time. But why is now not a good time?
Yeah.
Suddenly, you get so much more feedback, and eventually, you actually get to the right answer.
Yeah.
People won't do it in an email, but they'll do it on a call. And then they're suddenly caught off guard. And we've had it with customers, we've had it with investors when an investor's like, oh, I think your customer acquisition cost is too high. I'm like, okay, well, what's a good customer acquisition cost?
Right.
That type of thing. And then I eventually am like, okay, great. I'll come back to you when that customer acquisition cost is at that.
Right, right. Well, and I remember when I first got into real estate, I remember I missed out on a listing. And I had contacted them because I just wanted to know why. I was like, nope, that makes sense. The guy that they went with has been in business. I had just gotten into the real estate world within the last 6 months. But I was like, I'm just going to ask why. I just want to know truly why they chose to go with somebody else. And I'll never forget it. And they said, honestly, we thought your presentation was fantastic. We really liked you. But the other agent just seemed to be a little bit more knowledgeable because he brought up the fact that we are on homestead exempt, which means that they don't have to pay taxes. They said,
Yeah,
she's like, it was just something as little as that he just mentioned it and brought it up. And that just kind of told us that he understood the real estate market a little bit more than maybe what you did. I'm like, okay, all right. That's all I needed to know. And so like now every listing appointment I go to, when I go to the assessor site, I'm paying attention. Are they paying taxes? Does the tax dollar say zero? Is it only $100? Well, if it's only $100, it's because they qualify for homestead exempt. And then there's a time frame that if you move out between or before this date, that they won't be tax exempt for that year. So
yeah,
it was just like that one learning piece of advice. But if I would never have called them and asked, I would have no idea. I'm sure I
totally.
figured
Yeah.
out that homestead exempt later on, but because I asked, I found it out a lot sooner. And I've actually had another agent who's not used to losing out on deals because she's very well known in the community, but um, she had a client who ended up listing with me, and she actually called me because we have a really good relationship. And she said, "Do you mind if I call them and ask them why?" And I was like, "Go for it. Like, I want you to know why they chose to go with me over you. Like, that's how people learn. That's how you
Yeah.
grow. Where most agents would be like, 'Don't talk to my clients.' No, go ask. Like, they already signed with me, so I didn't care. But
Yeah.
like, go find out. Figure it out. Like." Know why somebody chose to go somewhere else, or it could be something to do with our product, but it could be something to do in their life and pricing or whatever their case is.
Exactly. And that's like the biggest thing of that learning. I've found also that if you tell people, like, hey, I'm actually like after a sales call, and if someone says no, it's like, hey, I'm actually trying to get some mentorship and advice. Can you tear this apart for me and tear it apart and tell me what I could have done better? Because the second you say that, then they're like, I'm going to tell you just how it is.
Mhm.
But a lot of times, like, for example, when we first had pricing, we had a free package. And we
Uh-huh.
said, hey, we'll give this to you for free. And so then I would say, hey, can you give me some advice on what you think of the product? And people would be like, oh, I think you should change the button color. I think you should do this. I think you should do that. And then when it came time to ask them for money, they just didn't use the product, or like they didn't value, like they were like, oh, I'm not going to pay for it and I'll just jump off. And it was like, okay, the advice you were giving me was terrible advice. Like the button color is not going to change things. And so then I had to change my mindset and be like, hey, how much would you pay for this? And it's okay if you say $0.
Mhm.
What would you pay for? And then if they say, oh, I'd really pay for 24/7 repair coordination. Great. So if I build 24/7 repair coordination, will you sign with me for $40 a month? And you're a beta customer. So like you get it for cheaper for your 10 properties because you're going to be one of the first customers on it. So you're going to get a huge freaking discount on it. But will you pay? Yes, I will pay $40 for the first year. And then you're like, okay, now I'm on to something. But a lot of times when I hear advice, it's the wrong advice because you haven't set it up properly. And
Mhm.
no one wants to hurt your feelings. It's
Mhm.
sort of like job interviews. We'll always tell people like, thanks so much for your resume. At this time, it's not a fit for this role, but we'll keep you in mind for other roles.
Mhm.
But really, what we should be telling that person is like, you have 4 spelling errors in your resume. You did not talk about what you did, why you did it, and the impact to the business. It's really fluff. It's like, I filed papers. And it's like, that's not going to move the business forward. But if you tell people that advice, a lot of people take it negatively of like, how rude for
Mhm.
you to do that. And so our templates are like very standard and very friendly where people like, oh, that was a great interview. And like, they'll reach out to me in the future.
Yeah.
But no, it's just us being nice
Right.
because if you give direct feedback, a lot of people don't take it. And so, from an entrepreneurship perspective, I think the best thing to do is to say, I want the real advice. I can take it, I can handle it. And then they'll give you the real feedback of all this stuff was terrible. I wouldn't pay for that. I think that your presentation was horrible. And it's like, why is my presentation horrible? And like, I didn't see this, I didn't see that. And then I think you're right, you're really onto something and you can iterate and tweak and improve things. And I think a lot of times you think everything has to be perfect at the beginning. It's like, no, you need to get out there and then you need to iterate on it constantly until you get it right.
That's yeah, because so actually I've done this twice now. I send out emails to a group of people that I trust, maybe some people who like I don't know, like somebody I've never I haven't talked to in a long time, but I basically have sent this out more recently was to people I know, but I was like, hey, give me some feedback on what you feel I can improve on and what I need to work on moving forward. I want 5 pieces of advice. And most of them they're so nice, but they're like, oh, that's so hard. But here
Yeah.
are some things, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, I'm so sorry. I hope that doesn't sound rude, but you're an amazing person. And I was like, you don't need to like I want that advice. I want that constructive criticism. I don't take offense to that because if I don't believe what you say, like I'm a very open-minded person, but if somebody says, Shay, your pink hair looks like shit, well, I'm not going to take offense to that because I don't have pink hair. You know what I mean? Like I don't
Yeah.
believe, so like people take offense to things that really are not even like relevant to them. But I want that constructive criticism. And I want people to let me know, like, hey, Shay, if you could do this, or if you could do that, or change this, or if you improved on this a little bit better, or got organized. That's really what everybody says, but
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
my organization, which I know. I was like, that's not an insult because I know. But yeah, I mean, I just sent that out last week, and then the one I did that before that was probably a couple years ago, but I'm open to that feedback. I should send it out to my past clients. That sounds scary, but
Yeah.
I should do it actually. I just want to
Yeah.
know, like, hey, what was some things that went well, but what are some things that you wish I would have done? What are some expectations from your agent? I should do that. I'm going to do it. Okay. I'm going to do
Yeah, and anonymous surveys are great too. So if I say, hey, I've
it.
sent this out to 100 people, it's anonymous, it's a Google form, it doesn't ask for your email address. I want the most honest feedback from you, and you can tear anything and everything apart, then you get that. Also, I found when you give feedback, like especially with employees and people you've hired, because we have a global team, we have a large team, and so I find with employees, some take feedback much better than others. And
Mhm.
usually it's the management because they've been around the block and they're like personally trying to develop so they can take anything. But
Yeah.
I found the peanut butter approach to be, or sorry, the
The
sandwich
sandwich
approach to be very
approach.
good.
Good, bad,
Yeah, where I'm
good.
like good, bad, good. And yeah, the sandwich approach I feel like has been very helpful because then I'm like, remember to work on that thing in the middle. Sometimes though, people almost take it as like, oh, it's a small thing, the middle thing. It's like, no, it's a big thing.
I actually just said that to like one of my best friends. I had to pull this up because it was the funniest thing. Because she said, I have to do um, reviews for 10 people, got 3 out of the way. She goes, I'm not looking forward to the last one because, or the last 2 because they're terrible and I have to give them bad reviews. I said, well, make sure when you're giving, yeah, I said, be sure when you are giving a bad review that you give them something good that they've done to start with. Then you give them a bad news, then kind of a recap with something good again. And she goes, oh, the sandwich method, good idea. And she goes, I said, yeah, you can tell them something like, hey, you have fantastic hair, you suck at your job, but you have a great personality. And she
Yeah.
goes, it's more like, she's like, well, his hair's terrible, but he's got a decent beard. So nice beard. Every client wants to fire you and you make the team laugh. So
Yeah.
that was the sandwich. We were obviously joking, but that was just yesterday.
That's
Um,
so funny.
but it is, I mean, obviously she'll be a lot more sensitive than that. But yeah, like the sandwich approach really is a great approach because you do want to point out people's strengths and then hone in on the negative or like their weaknesses and like what they need to work on, and then go back to like, but hey, you do a really good job at this. So that way they don't, especially if you want to keep them on the team, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, totally,
Yeah.
totally. And
Yes.
then the other thing with hiring that I found is there's some people who are just not a good fit for your team.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, they're not in the right position. And like you brought it up of like, hey, organization isn't your thing. And usually salespeople, it isn't.
Yeah.
Sales is totally different. And so I think from that perspective, the question is like, is this the right position? Because I think a lot of times you hold on to people and then you micromanage, you're constantly trying to, it's like, this is not working. I should not have to. You should be a self-starter. You should be able to build things yourself. And so I think there's also that, just like with a business, it's like, do I hold on to this person? Do I repurpose them into a different position? Or do I just say, go find something else? And I think the faster you come to this is not right for them objectively, and here's the reasons why, the better you can build an A plus strong performing team.
Yeah, because as crazy as it is, like I'm not an analytical person, but there are people who are out there who love to be
Yeah.
analytical and love numbers. So for me, I'm like, no, there's nobody. No, there's no way anybody likes that, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so like
And
for
I
me,
love it.
yeah, and like it took me a while to realize like no, people love that. There are people out there. I'm a bigger vision. Like I can do that. I can get out there. I'm sales, you know, I do sales, I do all of that stuff. But working me through the like day to day, I'm like, I want to fall asleep. Like that's terrible to me. So find and realizing that there are people who do enjoy those other positions, but like you said, it's probably not the person, it's the position that they're in. And it has to be a
Yeah.
right fit for them in return that they have to be a right fit for the business. So it goes hand in hand, and you can, you know, if they're just not a right fit for the business, you could it's not really that they're not, it's just the business isn't right for them, you know, or that
Exactly.
position's not right for
Yeah.
them.
Yep.
So yeah,
Exactly.
if somebody put me into an Excel data analytical kind of thing, I'd be like, no. At
Yeah.
first, I remember being young, I'm like, oh, I'm such an analytical person because I know that's what people wanted to hear. But now where I'm at, I'm like, I would never tell somebody that I am a very detail-oriented analytical person. I have somebody who is on my team, and that's what she does. She is amazing. She is a fantastic person. I'm not going to pretend that I'm the most detail-oriented person because I'm not. I'll
Yeah.
be the first
Yeah.
to admit that. My husband will probably be the first, and then I'll be the second. But no, okay. So Dana, tell me, what is one piece of advice as we wrap this up? What is one piece of advice that you would give, whether it's your younger self or maybe somebody else who's looking to get into the entrepreneurial field?
Yeah. So if it's one for my younger self, it would have been to buy real estate and get into real estate earlier, or buy Bitcoin back then, one or the other. Um, and I really wish I would have saved more. I think in my 20s, I was actually making quite a bit of money at these tech startups, like big tech companies, I should say, that I was kind of like blowing through money. And I was like, huh, I should have invested it. I should have had passive income, versus going on 12 vacations and 12 different countries every single year and weekend.
Yeah,
So I think there's a bit of that, which kind of goes to my second point of starting a company. Don't run out of cash.
right.
You have as much time on your side if you don't run out of cash.
Mhm.
Like I had $30,000 that literally lasted 2 years because I was incredibly frugal. But Hemlane wouldn't exist. And, people out there would, I mean, customers tell us every day how much we've changed their lives.
Mhm.
And we wouldn't exist for them if we had run out of that cash.
Mhm.
And we would have had to raise sooner off of an idea that wasn't right, like raised from venture capitalists off
Mhm.
of an idea that wasn't right. But the second that you have enough cash in the bank, you suddenly don't make short-term decisions, you make long-term decisions.
Right.
So for me, it's like, I'm not building for 2 months out or 3 months out. I'm building to make this business a sustainable long-term business
Mhm.
that is not stressful for me and not stressful for others. But if you say I only have 3 months of runway for this business, suddenly you start making really rash decisions that actually hurt you a lot more in the long term. And an example of that is like taking on more debt financing. I've seen so many businesses take on debt financing and then they're like, I'm selling my house. And I'm like, why are you selling your house? And they're like, oh, because the business isn't doing well and I have to pay back this loan. And so I think that cash is something that's really underestimated. And to your point, if you're not good in analytical, have someone on your team who is, to
Mhm.
help be like, hey, listen, we are going to run out of cash in 2 months, 3 months. You always should ask, what's my burn rate? What's
Yeah.
my runway? And you want to get that to 12 months plus always, because it's always going to take so much longer.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It absolutely is. No, I appreciate you being here, Dana. We're definitely going to need to talk because I do have investment properties, so I'm very
Perfect.
intrigued on what you do. Mine are here locally, but we'll dive
I
into,
love it. Yeah.
after this. But I do appreciate you being here, and you're obviously a very intelligent, and smart. I guess I wouldn't even tell our listeners you have two kids, twins, boy and girl. How old are they now?
Yes. Yeah, I had them while I was building the business. And so I think from that perspective, and they were little, right? Like when we took on our first check of an investor, which was I think we took on $3 million, I signed that and then found out I'm pregnant with twins. And of course, there's like a lot more on the business because the investors want a huge payback and a huge payout and growth, and they want you working all around the clock. And so I think from that perspective, you can do it all. But it's in like pieces and at the right times and balancing it. And so from that perspective, yeah, I probably started the company at the world's worst time for me personally, and it worked out well.
It is. Well, I think people use their kids as an excuse as to why they're not where they are, but you
Yeah.
need to actually use them as empowerment, and they are the reason you're doing what you're doing. And life is either hard now and easy later, or easy now and hard later. You just have to choose your hard. And you obviously made sacrifices to get to where you're at now because you want life to be easier the older you get. And that's
Yeah.
me too. Like, I'm not as concerned about my earned income now. Like, I make a good income, but I want to be able to set that money aside, buy other investments so I can build my long-term future and a legacy. I don't need this huge house, even though I may qualify for it. I don't need a brand new vehicle.
Yeah.
Mine paid off. It's got a huge crack in the window. Like, I don't need all of that stuff. Like, I'm good with living way below my means or where I've always kind of lived, while setting money aside into my Roth and other investments to be able to build my future for me and my kids. So, yeah,
Exactly.
it is
Exactly. I love
fun.
that.
It is fun. Well, thank you so much, Dana, for being here. If anybody needs to get a hold of you, or if there's somebody who's looking to get it, like myself, learn more about Hemlane, where can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, just shoot me an email. It's the easiest. Dana at hemlane.com, which is HEMLANE.com. You can also look me up, Dana Dunford. You can look me up on LinkedIn or any of the social media websites.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day. And that wraps up another inspiring episode of the Real Moms Podcast. A huge thank you to our incredible guests for sharing their story and insights today. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And hey, sharing is caring, right? Share this podcast with your fellow mompreneurs, friends, and anyone who you feel could use a dose of inspiration. Share it on your social media as well. But most importantly, if you found this episode helpful, please, please, please leave me a 5-star review. This helps get our information out to those who have never heard or seen us before. Are you feeling inspired and you're sure that you could add some value to the podcast? Shoot me a message and let's talk. We love hearing from you. So connect with us on social media. Tag me at Shay J Spitz. That's ShaeJSpitz. And share your thoughts and takeaways, or even suggest topics you'd like to have us explore more in the future episodes. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. Your resilience is your strength, and your pursuit of abundant living is truly remarkable. As always, keep thriving, keep growing, and keep embracing the beautiful chaos of being a mompreneur. Until next time, take care, stay real, and keep living abundantly.